So a lot of people often say this, the next speaker really needs no introduction, but in this particular case, I'll say a few words about Elana Shohamy, who many of you know her work, pioneering work, I would argue, in many different areas, and namely in language testing and evaluation, as my colleagues and some of the students from Teachers College will attest to, have read the work extensively. And in the other field, much as Alberto and Stefan and Elsa talked about, would be the focus on urban spaces and largely the linguistic landscape. On page 2 of the conference program, you have just but a few of the seminal work that Elana has done in linguistic landscape. And I'm certain that you will be able to talk further with her over the reception and in the question and answer period further about that. So I'm going to turn it over to one of the pioneers, if not the pioneer in linguistic landscape research that we are absolutely fortunate to have with us this evening, Elana Shohamy.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, hello everybody. Nice to be here again. I've been here a number of times and it's always inspiring to see what's happening in this consortium, but especially here in Colombia, and to see the work that's being done in terms of really working on teaching of languages through this thing which we are so, you said pioneer, but we are still really learning how to do these things, and I think this is why I'm so happy that you wrote the proposal in that direction, because in a way this is what we need to know, and relatively speaking we know very little about. And I'll try to bring in some ideas, but I want to say that everything we are doing in language and education is still work in progress. So we've been working on linguistic landscape for the first paper appeared, I would say, 2016, so we're talking about 10 years now. And in those few years, I'm proud to say there have been books and articles and conferences, yearly conferences, and the field is very dynamic and very active and actually moves in various directions that nobody predicted. Like we never predicted that we will not look only on things beyond language. We thought language was the thing, linguistic landscape. But in fact, what we are doing, and I know David would elaborate on that too, we're talking about all these other things which are happening in space. And it took us more than not even 2 years to realize that you cannot look at space by looking at language. And as Stefan had said, I think language is connected to everything else. You cannot ignore the pictures, you cannot ignore the smells, like Alistair Pennycook wrote an article about it. You cannot ignore the noise, everything is interpreted, the language is interpreted within a much broader context. And this is in a way what we know, that the field is so broadening, but how do we deal with the educational element, I think, of that is really in its early days, I would say. So I'll try to a little bit address some of those issues. And we have 15 minutes, and I probably wasted already 2 minutes, right? So basically, we are talking about linguistic landscape and language classroom. That's what I will try to do, and of course, looking at critical work. And the title has society. I won't talk much about technology, but place. So how come it's, what are these? That's New York still? I don't know. You don't see that? Only I, okay. So, okay, all right. So LL in public space, what I'm saying is different than the language in the classroom. And I think all the speakers already said that, because we're not talking about the same language. And in a way, if we think about schools and classrooms, whether it's elementary, high school, junior high, universities, kindergartens, basically the language that we teach, the language which we use, is very, so to speak, clean. But I would say very controlled, what we can say, what we cannot say, let alone the textbooks. They go through all kind of tests of what is legit and what is not. But basically, we are missing the language, and it's not necessarily bad language necessarily, but language that we can see all around us. So LL in public space is different than languages in the classroom. how is it that for so many years in language classes and other, we ignored that language, that every minute we go out, we see that language. And I think the eye at the beginning is really an example, an example of we kind of gained a new eye now by looking at other things that we as language teachers or language scholars or researchers or whatever, we didn't even think that they should count. So language ecology as applied, I'm reading now a quote, where am I? No, it's not moving, all right. So basically, is it possible to do a whole, how do you do, oh, you just do this? I don't want this other thing because I don't see, I want just, what do we do? Okay, so I'm quoting here from Claire Kremt's work, and she talks about language ecology as applied to language learning is being defined as a nonlinear, rational human activity, co-constructed between humans and their environments, contingent upon their position in space and history, and the site of struggle for the control of social power and cultural memory. And I think as I said before, the environment was not there, but it was always there in textbooks in very stilted ways, I would say, or very controlled way. But Claire Kremch, what she says, she encourages us. You cannot even think of language without looking at the environment, because language is not being spoken in a vacuum, it's actually being used in specific contexts. So two approaches, I'm saying, for using LL in schools and classrooms. And one of them, I differentiate between the two, but as you'll see, I want to combine the two. One of it is language teaching and learning. How can we use linguistic landscape for learning and teaching in the classroom? So we can bring in things from the environment, bring them to the classroom, and teach accordingly. Or, as you just mentioned, students go out. I teach a number of courses in linguistic landscape. Half of the semester, we're not even in the school. We're not in classes at the university. We always go out, and if I don't go out with them, they go on their own to different places. So in fact, everything that's being learned is based on what we see in the environment. So how do we connect? And I heard a few good papers a few years ago about Yiddish and Spanish, how the environment connects to linguistic landscape. So basically the idea is LL in public spaces serves as learning input, as a means for authentic language learning, different than the classroom, or as we like to say it, the city is like a textbook. So we see it here, the Columbia example. We see example like Peter Sayers, who's talking about students examine the spaces and gain knowledge about the uses of an English in public spaces, different than the language classroom. We have situations where sixth grade students go to different environment, and then they look at what they see there, they look at the languages, and they try to gain knowledge about what languages or awareness of languages and language varieties. So I moved it to this. Okay. So the second thing I would say, LL is a tool for social justice, equality, inclusion, and talking back. So most of my work till today was about contestation in the public space. I don't see the public space at all as something neutral. I see that every time you look at the public space, whether it's a poster that you like or don't like, there's some contestation. And most of my work was really to look at top-down versus bottom-up. In other words, what the government or central bodies will put versus how people will actually react to it, or talking back to the power. And this is what we do mostly, and the question is, how do we look at social justice within that? Equality, inclusion, talking back. Using LL in education implies the need for students to become aware, and Stefan had said it already, collect data, conceptualize, concretize, and begin to observe the multiple layers of meanings displayed via LL. The issue of criticality, and the question that bothers me is, how do you teach criticality? And one of my students in Israel now working on using the role of using metaphors in order to teach students how to become critical. So he interviews them at the beginning and he asks them, look at this commercial, what do you read in this? They say nothing. They read it more or less, as it is. But by using the notion of metaphors, which is very interesting, they learn, and we have very beautiful transcripts about that, they learn how to become more critical of commercials or advertisements in public spaces. And I would say much of the work that I'm doing now is how can we teach criticality? How can we teach students to look at the environment and become critical about it? So carrying out research on LL in education implies the need to consider... what's happening? Something is wrong with that, I don't know. Okay. In Hebrew, that Hebrew didn't come out. Okay, it came out the other way. All right. Okay, so I want to say today I got up in the morning and there was something that I saw in Ynet, which is the Israeli newspaper, and it says here, here was died our wife, mother's grandmother, and so on. And the whole story about it. This is already the clean version. Something didn't work, but let me tell you more about it. So basically, they came out that somebody wrote on the grave, the writing, the script, they wrote something that says, here buried so-and-so, and that so-and-so person actually did not pay for the tomb. So that's how you get, in the morning, this is what you see. So there is a famous case now that people are saying, that now somebody went there and he saw, wow, this is my next door neighbor. This is what you tell about this woman, that her family refused to pay for the script, for the writing, or for the whole tomb, in fact. This is what they said. And right away there is this commotion. I mean, is it nice to put something like that in the public space, something bad about a woman? But people didn't even notice because oftentimes we don't even read these things. And it talks all about talking back. So in the meantime, somebody just wrote back and said, what do you mean? You know, and then it was a whole process. It reached the point whereby somebody in the municipality said, we will pay for it. And the following day, what we see is actually what I wanted to show you, what I thought I was showing you. It's this. And you see that these are erased now. Here, I don't know where the original are. Here, this is where it said, we are not, her family refused to pay for the tomb, and this is now erased. So they gave this kind of compromise. They had reached some compromise in the Ministry of Religion, because it's owned in Israel by the Religion Ministry. They kind of said, okay, that's okay. We don't understand how it happened, but they are not allowed to do it, and right away they bring in something else. So this is kind of what I wanted to show as example of things that are happening in public space, and without reading them we cannot really understand, but it's possible to erase them. So LL in public space is a mirror of society, and hence is used as a tool for learners to become aware of the social, economic, and political issues, equality, and we said that, and as you just said before, leading to activism and transformation. Basically, the way I look at this critical view, I call this the tip of the iceberg. Through LL, one can interpret and understand deeper, often controversial issues of society, which are part of the foreign language learning. We cannot deny that, because we don't teach, of course, language in vacuum, and as you just said, we teach language in social context. So the tip of the iceberg is a hint, or what does it say in a dictionary, or a suggestion for a much larger or more complex issue. And here is the tip of the iceberg. So these are the three words you see in top. But actually underneath that you see a lot of information. And the example I like to use, this is my granddaughter a few years ago. And she looks at the sign which says, in the red, it says, people who are conscientious objectors should be freed. And then it says the word law, means no, which is do not free conscientious objectors. So she asks me, this is the tip of the iceberg. It means very little. However, this aroused the whole conversation about what are conscientious objectors, what are wars, what is military, what is compulsory service, why are people fighting about it, and that went on and on. Or something like this, she look at me, I'm a tree. So this is, you see this tree, and somebody is contesting it and putting it, take this off. I mean, it's a tree, it's killing the environment, and so on. So here, another, I just want to show you some more contesting things. So one is tattoo, one is Santa Claus in Israel, which is not a very common picture because, you know, Jews don't celebrate Christmas. So it became a contested thing, but in this neighborhood of immigrants, it was okay. So students, so think about the tip of the iceberg of something like that. This is from another study we do about breast augmentation in Colombia. And what you see here is like, what are they advertising here? How do women look, of course, in this situation? And the word wow, this, in other words, this very one word that actually signified so much more. So that actually to sell jeans, you may not know that, but it's to sell jeans, but actually how women are being displayed in public spaces, a very relevant issue today, and how as students, what do you think about it, girls, boys, and so on. And we have many more of those. This is like a neighborhood in Israel of asylum seekers. Again, just people as Linguistic Landscape call it. This is just yesterday in the New York subway. New Yorkers keep New York safe. So here it's just, you know, look at the subway, except probably nobody looks at the subway. They all look at the signs because they all look at their iPhones, right? And pre-K for all. And you see how much language there is just on the metro, on the subway. Free subway reads, which is another one of those. And 86th Street now has photos, pictures actually, not photos, but paintings. So here, you just see this picture, what does it mean in terms of people and what are they, and it's all Tigrinya on top of it, the language I could see. So that's another one, now narration, we talk about language narration, soundscapes, also as an example. We look at names of streets. There's Arabic in the middle, and for change, you know, just because it's a Supreme Court decision to include Arabic. Then we see a Palestinian village that people say here, some very ideological pro-whatever is there. And then somebody in graffiti says, you know, here used to be a Palestinian village that was destroyed. So the whole idea of contestation in public space, you can see really via graffiti, remapping of the city, like these are the towns, the areas that used to be here before Israel was founded. And so basically documenting the public space can trigger language learners to learn about societies, we said that, controversies, ideologies, which languages are overt and covert or deleted, who are the people behind these languages, who participates and why, and what are the main issues of societies. So who owns the public space is a major question that we ask. How much time do I have? I don't want to take so much. 3-4 minutes, okay. Who owns the public space? That's one of the major questions that we should ask our students. And that really relates to multilingualism and which languages have the right to exist in public space. If you put English, it'd be okay. But in many places, if you don't put Hebrew, for example, in Israel, in some places, you get fined. So the whole idea of ownership and how come the government or the municipality has the right to do anything, including those signs of women out selling jeans. So it is the public space arena of imposition, colonialization, contestation, discrimination, marginalization. I think that's a major question. What is this whole thing in the public space? Who puts it up? Why? And who has the right to write in the public space on multiple levels? Cities, neighborhoods, streets, schools, bus stations, homes, stores, markets, advertisements. Can unjust reality be resisted, protested? If LL in public space is unjust and violates social justice, can LL be used to change? And you were talking about activism and Professor Medina, and about the whole idea of LL be used to change and transform societies, cities, and neighborhoods. One of the big beliefs that me and many other people have, that if we change the signs, perhaps we will be able to change the attitudes. If we put multilingual signs in, especially in heritage neighborhoods, maybe people will think differently because they will see that. And we know how, and there are lots of studies that showing that if you see something in the public space, and we can see it with clothes, advertisers know this very well. When you put something in the public space, people want to be like that. And I have one study even in the 30s when they were reviving Hebrew, 1930s, one of the things they did is they put Hebrew everywhere. Nobody spoke the language. But they put Hebrew everywhere on public signs. The idea is somebody would say, oh, he speaks Hebrew, everybody speaks Hebrew, what am I doing here? I better learn Hebrew. And we know how fashion works and advertising. Advertisers know very well if you display something in public spaces, obviously it has effect on all of us, whether it's boobs augmentation or other things. Who makes policy decisions about public spaces? And I want to show you short research. It's not a big study, so it will not take long. But I want to show you that actually getting engaged with public spaces is really something that can change our behavior. And this study is simply about 11 grade students, Jews and Arabs. They had to go around their neighborhood and document 20 signs. And in the pretest, they claimed that Arabic in this area, Jaffa, near Tel Aviv, they claimed that Arabic was the dominant language because most of the people, you see the most Arabic in this town called Jaffa, near Tel Aviv. But after the documentation, they realized that the language, in fact, has very low number of LL signs in the public space. You understand? Okay. And first they said, yeah, Arabic is, no. This awareness made them angry and turned them, and angry is a very important term here, because being angry has something positive to motivating oftentimes to want to change. So wanting to change, transform their neighborhood to a more equal space. Similarly, working with school principals, I'm working with them, they don't have no clue about multilingualism. They have to go to the first class. This is for prospective principals, or people who are actually, some of them are practicing principalhood, and they have schools and so on. First class in this course, they have to go around and document public spaces in different areas that they decide. They come back, they talk like linguists. And all of a sudden they're saying, how come Arabic is not in the public space? Why is English everywhere? Nobody speaks English here. And why is Hebrew so important in the middle of an Arab town? So these are the kind of things that happen, and I have all the reactions and they do the presentations about it. But I think the whole idea is working with not just, what I wanted to say, not just language teachers and language learners, but also principals of schools to make them aware, or teachers of other subjects. And I think the social protest is it's not just for us language teachers. I think the whole idea of linguistic landscape is also for people who have no clue about languages. But language awareness is something that can emerge and be learned. So here are some of the reactions. If Hebrew and English appear on the sign, at least they should add Arabic, says one student, for the Arab inhabitants. So they will, what's happening here? Okay. So they will understand the point of respect. Or somebody says, I don't have any comment because look, from all the signs I analyzed, this was the only restaurant sign which included Arabic. So what I'm trying to show you, the engagement with documentation, taking cameras, taking pictures, analyzing it, brings you to think differently. This research reminds me of a research which was conducted in the US on black and white dolls for little children, where the black girls chose the white dolls because even in their thoughts and hearts, they thought white was more beautiful than black, and that this was a symbol of beauty. So their family, Arab speakers, by them choosing Hebrew, the way they see it is kind of not be honest with your own community. This is a private sign that a person from Jaffa put without any involvement of the state. This means that even Arabs slowly began to think that Hebrew was more beautiful and better, and sometimes they were ashamed of Arabic. So here we're talking that things exist, but the student becomes the agent that actually takes those pictures, and from taking those pictures and analyzing them, they come up with conclusions in the same way that the principals did. So the engagement actually with research, I call it research, but it's actually kind of research in documenting, analyzing, and so on, makes you change your mind. Most of the stores on our Jaffa are Arab, so why don't you put Arabic in the sign? Indeed, we are proud to be Arab, so why don't you show the world that you are proud Arab? So these are some of the reactions. It shows me that people didn't care about their mother tongue. So you see how emotional those things get because they see it what is going on here? They never noticed it before. They never thought about the situation that their parents are actually ashamed of their language, or the salesperson weren't patriots and they prefer to promote their business. So they have a whole theory of that already. And here, engagement with language in the public space, documenting, analyzing, and so on. and developing critical perspective can lead to transformation and change. And this is what I'm hoping for. I'd like to change this balance of, we are colonialized by those top-down languages. So it's like adding an eye. In that way, each building, each site, each sound, a billboard, an outdoor moving screen, a mall, a homeless person sitting in the corner of the street is actually a linguistic landscape text that has to be critically read. In other words, all those visible texts need to be processed as tip of icebergs for deeper and more complex meanings which are embedded in histories, cultural relations, politics, and humanistic interrelations. So this is it. Thank you.